Hello and welcome to the Car Kina Reviews channel, and welcome to the 2024 Hyundai Kona, all redesigned for 2024 on a new platform. It's gotten bigger, it has a lot of updates. In today's video, we're going to do a proper technical review under the hood. We'll look underneath it, outside it, inside it to see if this new update for the Kona is good or not good right after this. Let's start our technical review under the hood. Now, the Hyundai Kona comes in three powertrains. Two of them are gasoline, one is electric. We're going to leave the electric when we actually get one to test, and we'll talk about it. But let's talk about the gasoline models. And they are carried over from the previous generation, both engines. I don't know why we have two engine options that are carried over, but we do. Some changes in the powertrain itself, but let's talk about the engines first. So you have the 2-liter model in the kind of the SE and the SEL trims, the lower trims. That engine is very old school. Let's talk about some of its highlights so you can get an idea, because we've discussed it in other Hyundai models. It is non-turbo, non-direct injection, 4-cylinder engine. 2-liter, makes very little power, actually makes just under 150 horsepower. Now that engine has a plastic valve cover, 2-piece cylinder head, roller rockers, all good stuff, but it's basic. That's what I like about that engine, is it's basic. You do have two timing chains, one for the cam to the crank, one for the oil pump. Oil pump just sits underneath, very basic setup. And then you don't have turbos, you don't have a complicated direct injection and all that. It just has port injection. Just can't go wrong with that. Now the cooling system in the 2.0 does have a coolant management valve, so you can send coolant wherever it needs to go for faster warm-ups, which is nice. Actually, these coolant distribution valves or coolant management systems, they actually work well in cold weather because these engines warm up pretty rapidly. Now that engine does have EGR, which is that's how they keep it going for emissions. And the EGR location is the only concern about it. The cooler and the EGR valve is literally underneath the exhaust manifold, which could have put it in a better spot, but they didn't, and that's okay. Now let's talk about the 1.6-liter turbo engine, which is this one, the one we've been testing. Interesting engine because it's refined and it makes a lot of power for its size. It makes 190 horsepower. That's a lot for a 1.6-liter engine. The best thing about this engine is it doesn't feel extremely high-strung. Somehow, some way they managed to do that, and I like that. Let's talk about it a little bit. So this does have a plastic valve cover, same deal. Very similar construction, by the way, to the 2.0 with kind of modern technology. Plastic valve cover, 2-piece cylinder head, dual variable valve timing. You do have two chains, one for from the cam to the crank, one to the oil pump, very similar. Cooling system does have a coolant management valve that sends coolant wherever it needs to go. But this engine has one thing that's very cool about its valve timing and everything. It has continuously variable valve lift. So it can, independently from everything else, it can continuously variably change the opening of the intake valves. That is pretty cool. And actually, at the time this engine came out, it was the first engine to have that, and they were really proud of it, and they should. It's actually a pretty cool technology. But now it's getting a little older, and they're still using the same technology, and that was the cool thing about this engine. This engine now is direct injected only. And that is the one thing about it. You do have a high-pressure fuel pump that sits right on the valve cover, and then the injectors are underneath the intake manifold. They're not on top of the valve cover, which is the way you want them for service. This is not some hot race car. This is an everyday car you're going to put lots of miles on, so you don't want this complication. And they didn't do that, and that's nice. Now this engine is turbocharged, and it's turbocharged the bad old school way and the bad new school way. Let me explain. The turbo has an electronic wastegate. Usually, for reliability at least, electronic wastegate, an electronic little actuator in a very hot spot like that, they don't last the longest. That's just the way it is. And the second thing is, this has an air-to-air intercooler, meaning there's a lot of intake ducts going all the way to the front of the car where the intercooler is, and then air coming back. They don't have a liquid-to-air intercooler. It would have added a lot more components, but it's a lot more efficient and keeps things a lot more compact and simpler. Now, the cooling system on this engine, Also has a coolant management valve. Pretty cool how they do that stuff to help these engines warm up pretty rapidly. We had a really cold weather when we were testing this car. Actually warms up pretty rapid, which is nice. Additionally to that, with the cooling system, you do have a mechanical water pump, so nothing fancy there. Everything is pretty standard. Now in the transmission, we did have a change. If you have the 1.6 like this one in the limited and the N-line trims, you no longer have a DCT transmission, which, in case you were wondering, good riddance. DCT transmissions are great, not in a day-to-day car. They're just not reliable, not smooth, and they're just not a good idea in a day-to-day car. I'm glad Hyundai is moving away from them, it looks like. Now in the 2.0 models or the lower trims, you do still have a CVT, which I wish they would have got rid of it altogether and just put an 8-speed. This is actually a very nice 8-speed, shifts pretty good. It is sourced by Hyundai, it's not made by anybody else, which is something interesting about Hyundai. They always make their own stuff. I like it. This transmission is pretty smooth. I've seen a lot of not smooth 8-speed transmissions, especially with smaller engines. This one, pretty smooth, and I appreciate that. Now, before we wrap up this section, I want to talk about what do I see under the hood. Even though things are extremely similar to how the previous Kona was, Hyundai's build quality is medium. Not great, not terrible, medium. And they're really working hard on improving things. And I see a lot of small improvements in this car. And that is, they're going in the right direction, not in the wrong direction. They're not cheaping out. And this is something to be said, and it's credit to them. But then there is a few odd things that I wish they would, they probably never watch these reviews, but if you are watching, here's a few suggestions. They love to still use plastic coolant pipes. Not the junctions and whatnot, but these little pipes. If you are a mechanic, you've seen these pipes, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The ones that 5 years from now, if you look at them hard enough, they'll break. And then I love the over-elaborate plastic purge lines. They will also break in the future. I wish they would just put rubber lines for stuff like this. Put a rubber hose and a clamp. It lasts a lot longer. And I don't know if they really cost that much, and I understand you got to keep your costs down in a car like this, but these are the little things that they could improve, and things would be start to look up, because I like this engine. I think it makes a lot of power. It doesn't feel high strung, and that is a cool thing about it. Now the interesting thing, because the Kona has, and we're going to look at this in a bit, because the Kona's headlights are all the way down, you actually have a really nice spot to adjust the headlights. Very clear right there. You can easily adjust the headlights, and I think that is kind of the byproduct of this interesting outside look. And lastly, kind of a relic from the past. For some reason, 2024 car has a diagnostic port. For those who are younger, you don't remember those days, but for those who have worked on cars in that era in the 90s, especially in the 90s, cars had diagnostic ports under the hood where you could jump stuff and get codes and do all kinds of testing and whatnot. This one also has a diagnostic port. Super blast from the past. I am not a Hyundai mechanic specialist, so if you are a Hyundai specialist, do let us know what does that do exactly, or is it just there just because? Let's take a look underneath the 2024 Hyundai Kona. Everything's covered up, and we're starting to see this more in like economy cars. Things are getting a lot more better covered up, and you see that here. Pretty simple though. They left the oil filter opening, drain plug is right here. They left that wide open, and then you notice we have a little support right here for the powertrain. Every time you see that in the future of this car, there'll be a lot of vibration. It's just a byproduct of having the mount down here. But let's look at the front suspension. Aluminum knuckle, which is interesting. This does have a McPherson strut. Does have a steel control arm with a kind of a one-piece ball joint part of the control arm. I wish this was separate. Hyundai have some of their cars that are like that. Not this one though. Single piston caliper in the front, pretty adequate. Sway bar link right here. It looks like steel, but then the noises it makes, more than likely this is a steel sway bar link, which is good. I like that they're getting away from the plastic stuff. But what I like about this is there's coverings. And I actually driven the previous Kona. It was very loud. and that's just how it is. This one's actually not bad. It's not luxurious quiet, it's not Genesis quiet, but it is quieter and something you don't anticipate in a car like this. And I start to see why. We have some coverings. Now the exhaust does come in the middle right here. This is all new platform that they have for these now. And the exhaust, typically, historically from Hyundai, they're not the highest quality stuff in the world. Drive shaft comes right here out of the transfer case. It's actually a very small drive shaft, and that's the interesting thing about it. We do have some insulation in this area, nothing here. And then saddle fuel tank, which very cheap looking muffler here. Fortunately, again, their exhausts are not the best. Charcoal canister is right here. I think that's a good spot for it. Some manufacturers love to hide this. This one is readily available, so labor will not be very high. Then we end up at the rear differential. This is of course the all-wheel drive model here, the Limited. Pretty interesting setup that they have a motor where you can lock this. That's actually pretty nice to see in a car like this. I mean, this is not really meant for off-roading, but this gives you a little bit more work. And the diff is not tiny, the axles are, but the diff is actually a decent size for the size of this car. But here's where things get a little strange. I don't understand why car manufacturers do this. Probably save cost, but makes manufacturing interesting. So this is an all-wheel drive model. Look at the rear suspension. It's kind of a multi-arm suspension. All of them are steel. You do have an aluminum knuckle. You do have a single piston caliper over here with an electronic parking brake. Everything looks pretty standard and nice actually. But here's the interesting part. If you go to the front wheel drive model that doesn't have all-wheel drive, it has a beam suspension. So it's completely different than this. I don't know why manufacturers do that, because to me, at least, to my humble opinion, I mean, they do that for cost, but aren't they always trying to make manufacturing simpler? And now you have two completely different rear suspensions and two completely different parts. I wish they would have just left it like this. Probably this suspension rides actually pretty nice for this car, for what it is. I think that would have helped a little bit, but that's what they did. So heads up, if you go with the front wheel drive model, you will have beam suspension in the rear. Let's take a look at the outside of the 2024 Hyundai Kona. There's a lot to be said about how this car looks. It's an interesting look. So the very front of it, looks okay. That's one way that I'm going to say it. You do have this giant bar that goes across. I wish they would have integrated the headlights here, but instead the headlights are all the way down here, which makes it has a very interesting profile when it's coming up. And I guess Hyundai is joining the fashion of everybody. The emblems are now moving up, and they're kind of departing the front of the car. Now they're on a flat surface. This is becoming a new trend in the automotive industry. Everybody's almost doing it. But there's something very interesting here. Do you see these two panels that almost look out of place? They are out of place because these are actually radiator vents that open and close. So I like that they did this because they thought of the electric version. So this doesn't look that far from electric version. These open and close to allow airflow in or not allow it. Now the bottom in this particular model is always open because as we talked about, that is an intercooler right there. But I like this. This is very smart because it's actually part of the design of the fascia. It's not something hidden behind a grille. It looks actually pretty cool. You can really brag about this with your friend when it opens and closes. It looks like a spaceship, kind of similar to the Ioniq 6 that we looked at. And that is the end of the good things about the exterior. Because as we walk to the side, things, yeah. I don't know what happened here. They started okay, and then things really went downhill. The only car this reminds me of, and I'm sorry Hyundai, this is again just a matter of opinion, is this one. Yeah. I don't know why we're obsessed with not circles, with this shape, and then I don't know why this shape starts here and then comes back. I understand it's a design language, but it is such a odd design language. It almost looks like we were gonna do this continuous and then we ran out of plastic, so we just cut it there. Same thing in the back. The back is even worse. the side is not a good, it's not a good side. Let's put it this way. And what makes it even worse is this line that goes up and just kind of blends in. And then I love it how there's a big line here and there's a big line here. They meet right here and there's nothing here. It just makes it look completely odd. It's almost like the front doesn't match the back. And then, yeah. But again, looks are just that, looks. This is the kind of car that after you initially buy it, it just blends into your background. And when we talk about the interior, it's a good blend in the background because that's where things are at. In the back, things are, again, go back to better. I actually like this taillight. I wish if it didn't have this, this would be actually a very sleek look. Because if you notice, it's kind of a sleek body line. There's not a lot going on, except the bottom. That's when things kind of carry over from the side and look odd. It's a lot bigger. The Kona's gotten a lot bigger on this new platform, and this will lead us to some of the other sections, but it's gotten a lot bigger. And the badging, they didn't get carried away. They just put H-Track for all-wheel drive, 1.6T, so you know which model it is. And there is that. But then there is the important things. See, this car has a smart key, just like this. They are extremely proud of the fact that the key mimics the badge of Hyundai, which is okay. I mean, yeah, sure, it's a cool thing. But here's the problem, and we've seen this with other models. They designed this key and they were so proud of it and everybody was clapping. And then somebody in the back of the room raised their hand and said, "Sir, what about the mechanical key? What if the battery dies? How are you going to open the door?" So they did this. This is the worst afterthought of 2024, 2023 even, because we've seen some models. So they didn't put the key in this giant thing. They actually gave you this insert, which has the mechanical key, which this one have fallen off in my pocket like 10 times already. So this will be the first thing you lose. Oh, but let me leave it at home. What if your battery dies? This is not a good idea. But what is a good idea? Watch this. Most cars, and I will leave this key here for a moment, just for us to do this demonstration right. Most cars that have power back doors, and you want to open them hands-free, yes, it's coming up, the dance. Let's do that dance. Yeah, the dance. We don't like the dance. It's actually having the ability to open this back door hands-free is nice. You come in with a lot of stuff. You can't put your stuff and open it, but it just helps. But the kick sensors, they never work. They only work when you don't want them to work, and they never work when you want them to. But Hyundai did something here extremely interesting. So this is how this starts. Car's locked. You're at the supermarket. You came in with stuff in your hands. You have the key in your pocket. You're going to walk around the car. Hear that? Keep standing here. And guess what the car is going to do? That is the smartest idea I've ever seen in a while. Usually automotive companies, they'll invent things that are just horrendous, and after 2 years nobody cares about them, they forget. This is a really good idea. But you might be wondering, wait, is this going to open every time you walk through this orientation? Watch what happens. We're going to try this again for you to see what happens if you just walk away. Like you're walking next to your car in your garage, you came here, but then I went around and went away. It stops. You have to physically stand here and stay here. It continuously sees the key, then it's going to open the back. That is pretty cool. That means not every time you walk in the back, it's just going to open the back door. That would be a little silly. They did this really well, folks. I wish we get rid of the kick sensors. We start doing this. This is better. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than the kick sensor. Trust me. Let's look at the back here. I think it's a decent amount of space for the size of this car. The only concern I have is because of the design, this is a little bit too sharp of an angle. If you put something high, Well, it's gonna intrude on your cargo space. You can fold the seats, it is better. I think for the size of this car, it's a decent space. And then you do have a dying relic, which we love, a spare tire. I think this is a great sight right here. I love that they just redid this car and they still have a spare tire here. That is actually a good thing in a car like this. Maybe if you have some exotic with completely different staggered tires and all that, yeah, I understand you don't need a spare. But in this is an everyday car. You do need a spare. Of course, it's a power closing back door, which is nice. This is, of course, optional in this limited trim, and that is the outside of the Kona. Let's take a look at the inside of the Hyundai Kona. And I think this is where they did things really well. The first thing is, they did not go all out with materials and trying to wow you with this soft touch. No, everything is plastic here. But that is exactly what a buyer of this car would expect. Instead, they focused on function and useful features. And I really like that. The biggest thing about this car is it doesn't feel small. When you sit here, it's actually a spacious area. And that is because the dash is pushed back. You don't have a huge dash in front of you. And then the center console area is low. It gives you that feeling that you're sitting high and everything is lower. And that is what they did here. And they did it really well. I really like this interior. Let's start with the steering wheel. You have a rotary dial for volume. And it's just feels very nice. I have to say that. I like they're very basic, the controls on the steering wheel, and they're very clearly laid out, and I really like that. Now, they did get rid of their Hyundai logo, and they put the 4 dots, Morse code for H, which is pretty cool. It's just a little touch. Now, this steering wheel has a very odd shape. It's not a circle, and it's not a flat bottom. It's like half and half, almost like oval. Interesting. It doesn't really get in your way, but it's just an interesting observation here. Now, the gauge is a screen that does absolutely nothing, but when you turn your turn signal, it shows you your blind spot if you have a model that is equipped. Interesting, but I'm usually against screens because they just add to the cost of the car for nothing. In some of the higher end cars, you get more features that are actually usable, like display the map. Not this one. That's just how they went with it. The biggest change here, though, is the infotainment system. All updated. This is the latest infotainment system from Hyundai. It works very good. And I like that they solved majority of the issues, and at least that I saw with their previous systems. It was slow at startup. It was kind of glitchy, and it doesn't have wireless Apple CarPlay and whatnot. This one solves all these issues. Very rapid startup, very responsive. Does have wireless Apple CarPlay, which is really what we had with the previous system. It was very featureful, and this one is very featureful, but it was slow. This one is very fast, and I like that. But the biggest thing is they didn't get carried away completely. Usually when they update infotainment systems, they get rid of every single touch button and it all goes on the screen just to make it cool. They didn't do that here. All your controls are physical. HVAC, if you want to you don't even have to touch the screen. You want to change between radios, it's all physical button. You want to turn on your heated seats, heated steering wheel, auto hold, they're all here. And here's an interesting one. In this limited model, you had cooled front seats in a car like this. They have a lot of features, folks. 360 camera, ambient lighting, and my personal favorite question mark. You will get into some really high-end cars, and the sunroof will just be manual. You just roll the shade with your hand. This one has a power shade for the sunroof. They could have totally dropped the price a little bit, made it manual, and nobody would have complained, but they did this. Interesting, just a little observation as well. Now, the one thing that is interesting here, the center console has this big open space, and you have a wireless charger here, and the center console lid, it is a lid, it's a small lid, but it's actually not a center console area, it's open. You can actually put your hand through the front and reach it. So you're really covering this just for the armrest. It's not really a compartment that you can put stuff, kind of hide them away. They're always just here right in front of you. The other thing is the USB-C right here in the middle. It's just a USB port. Why is there something to talk about it? No, because they put an entire dedicated button to switch between charging and using it as a USB to connect to the infotainment system. That is pretty interesting. It's just a complete dedicated button just for that. Folks, this interior feels very well thought out. Not necessarily built. I mean, the build quality is good, but the materials are just hard plastic everywhere. But it's very easy to live with. I really like that. I really appreciate that, because I see so many car manufacturers trying to wow you with the interior that they intrude on your function. They feel cramped, small, and kind of have a lot of things that you have to work with. Here, things are basic, things are functional, all your important controls are physical, and that is a really welcome change. They really did this interior well. Let's talk about the back seat of the Hyundai Kona. I'm 5'7", this is my driving position. I have knee room. Usually in a car like this, you sit in the back, you don't expect knee room. But actually, it's not a bad place to be if your driver is medium height towards the shorter side. If they're tall, they push their seats all the way back, it's gonna be a little tighter. But this is not bad even for an adult, and that's a good thing. That's one of the part that this thing got bigger in 2024. You do have some USB-Cs here. You do have rear vents, which is nice. You don't have a seat pocket here, but you have one on the other side. I think they carried their good things inside here. You have a little bit more space, and the biggest thing is the seats feel wide. Now, if you sit three people here, 3 adults, it's gonna get tighter, but when you're sitting here, just there's 2 adults in the back, it's actually a comfortable place to be, and that is a really good thing here. Let's talk about some things I do not like about the 2024 Hyundai Kona, starting with the gas mileage. See, they kept the same engines and the car got bigger. So the gas mileage actually dropped from the previous generation, and really in real world testing, we had a few really cold days here in Chicagoland. It was not impressive at all. I mean, this is an economy car after all. Gas mileage is not good. That's the biggest thing I think about this car. The second thing is the shifter. It's going to take you a minute or a scare or two to get used to it, and they took that from the Ioniq 5. It is, your brain is programmed where reverse is up, drive is down, and it's going to take you a minute to get used to that. So just if you're buying one of these cars, focus on that, because it's going to be annoying initially until you get used to it. And the biggest thing is the outside looks. They're not good. I mean, the side just looks completely odd. And I wish they would have spent as much time as they did on working on the inside, on the outside, to make it simpler and more functional. Like, they made that swoop design and they cut some of your storage space in the back because of the body lines. I wish they would have done that less. Would have just make it more bland, because people that buy this car, they're not buying it for its looks. They're buying it for its function. And in that department inside, it's really good, but if the looks were a little less offending, I think it would work a little better. Just my humble opinion. So should you buy a 2024 Hyundai Kona? Folks, I think they did this update well. The inside is the biggest thing. This is not a showstopper, and the looks in the outside are not the best, especially the size. They just don't look good, at least in my humble opinion. But the inside is where you're going to spend most of the time in this car. This is an everyday car. Eventually, the looks of the outside will just blend in the background and it doesn't matter. But the inside is where they did things very, very well. It is bigger, and the layout of everything is very functional. They didn't really focus on materials and trying to wow you with little things. No, they focused on function and comfort, and I think they did that very well. It is quieter than the previous generation. It is more featureful. The only side effect of that is it did get a little expensive, but the same can be said about all cars in this era. You option this out at this level, which has a lot of options for, I mean, many luxury cars sometimes don't have this many options. You're looking at $34,000. That's a lot of money for a small car like this, but again, same can be said about all cars in this era. Now, on the reliability front, the powertrains are basically carried over, so there's nothing groundbreaking here and new, and that does come with the sacrifice of lower gas mileage. The move from the DCT transmission in the higher trims to a 8-speed torque converter transmission is a move in the right direction. I just wish they would have done it across the board, so we have one transmission, no CVT, no DCT, just a honest-to-God 8-speed transmission, and life would be wonderful. Fortunately, they didn't do that. I wish they do that in the future. This update was done well. This is a functional functional car. Reliability in the end is not the top of the list, but it's not also the bottom of the list. It is in the medium, and the good thing with these cars, you get a 10-year powertrain warranty, so in case something turns out not to be good, at least you got that long warranty. But living with this car, the interior is where it's at, and I think that's what people are going to be kind of drawn to and buy this car for, and they did that part really well, especially that infotainment system. And last note on this car, I guess Hyundai is joining some manufacturers that love to put their new tech in their kind of the lower cars before they put it on the higher cars and the luxury brand, because in my eyes this infotainment system is better than some of those Genesis ones. I wish they would have started with the Genesis first and then roll the updates downhill and eventually make it its way to the Kona. They started with the Kona. That's okay. If you're buying a Kona, that's a good thing. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some other videos. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.